Hey there, crafty friends. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel today. In this video, I'm going to be creating with a couple stamp sets from Not2Shabby shop. This one here is called Bouquet of Happiness, featuring these awesome sentiments and beautiful florals. And then I love this stamp set called Pup in a Cup, and I really wanted to use this image in my card today. So let's go ahead and get started. So for my first card, I'm going to go ahead and make a slimline. This is a smaller size slimline. It is 3.5 wide, but is only 7.25 inches tall. I put my stamp off of the edge because I just wanted to get a portion of the floral, and I wanted to do some layering and masking so that I could have the coffee cup with the pup in the same image. Now this is Bristol Smooth paper, and I'm going to go ahead and use some clear embossing powder, and then after heating my heat gun for a few seconds, I go ahead and melt that powder while it's really hot. And now I have that image there. I wanted to go ahead and create a second card as well. Sometimes when you have everything out, it's a good time to do some mass producing. In this case, it's just going to be a second card, but I was inspired to do some white embossing. So I'm using clear Versamark with some white embossing powder, and I had just envisioned this after seeing the floral stamped. It inspired me to try something different. So in this card, I'm going to stamp the entire floral image and then cover the card base with the stamps, stamping off of the paper. I had to get a little creative because it was a slimline card. It goes off of my stamp tool, and I did partial stamping all the way around to get the nice coverage of the entire card base. And I know that I wanted to do some inking, so I'm using my little embossing buddy tool there to get the powder on there, because I don't want any embossing powder where outside of the lines, since I know I want to use some distress inks for this. So I think that turned out so pretty. So now I have a second card in the making. Since I still have my flower stamp, I went ahead to create my mask so that I could stamp that coffee cup behind my first card there. I'm just going to fussy cut that out. I find that using a Post-it is really handy. It sticks just fine for me to get my layered stamp over there, over the top. And in this case, it's the little pup in a cup. And once I have it centered, I'm going to go ahead and prepare it with my anti-static tool and some more VersaFine ink and get that stamped on there. So I had envisioned this cute little pup sitting on a table with the cup, inside the cup, and then a little bouquet of flowers in front of it. So I think that it turned out so cute. Again, I want to brush off any excess powder because I don't want that embossing powder anywhere but on the lines. And once I have that melted up, I'm starting to imagine what this card is going to look like. I feel like it needed a little something in that lower right hand corner, so I'm going to place that smaller floral stamp that comes in that stamp set into the bottom corner, and I feel like that kind of evens it out a little bit. And so same as before, melting that down. I'm doing a lot of embossing today, which is something that I really love, and it's a nice way to step up your card and take it up to the next level. I notice that when people receive my cards and they always mention the embossing and the texture, they really think that's kind of a neat thing. And for non-crafters, they just can't even imagine how in the world did I do that. So the embossing is definitely a way to step up your card making. It does take a little bit more time, a little bit more patience, but I feel like it's well worth it in the end. So I chose the Love You Bunches. There's so many great sentiments on that Bouquet of Happiness stamp set. And then now my card is ready to be colored. I'm going to use my Zig Clean Color Reel brushes today. I haven't used these markers in a really long time, so I was excited to get going with those and do a little bit of Not quite watercoloring because I'm going to be using the blender brush, but I love the way that the florals look using the zig markers. The darkest color is going to be the light pink, and I think that it's so pretty. And I'm just going over where the shadows will be on the flowers and filling those in. And then I'm going to blend it out with the pale pink. So it's a little bit of a different shade, but it blends out beautifully and it gives you that shadowy effect, blending out that light pink with the pale pink. And I'm going to leave a portion of the petal just white, because once I get all that color filled in, then I'll go ahead with the blender and blend that out. And it does give it like a watercolor wash look to it. And I just love how that looks. I think that it turns out so pretty. Once I get all of that blended out, all the big petals and the little petals and then those little buds, and I can't forget that little flower there in the corner. Once I get that blended out, I can go back in with that pale pink just to give it another layer to make it a little bit more rich. And then I'll take my blender brush out and blend that again a second time. For the little leaves, and my darker green is going to be the mid green. And once I get a layer of that green down, I'll go ahead and blend it out with the pale green. Just adding those little touches really starts to bring the coloring together, and the image is starting to pop. I'm going to go back in with that darker green just to give it a little bit of dimension. And then now it's time to start the pup. So for the pup, the dark brown, I'm going around the edges of the ear as well as his little muzzle. And that dark brown is pretty dark, but I know with the little pugs, they always have a little bit of depth in the color around their eyes. And so I'm doing the ears, his little muzzle, and his eyes with the dark brown, and blending it out with the mid brown. Already he's turning out so darn cute. Now the lightest brown is called Oatmeal, and for that I'm going to go ahead and blend out the center of his little cheeks there, and I'm going to go around his face with that lighter brown and then blend it out using the blender. And I love that it's a nice contrast, and these colors seem to go together so well to make this little pup come to life. I'm going to blend out around the eyes a little bit with the lighter color, and I'm so used to working with Copics, and it is definitely a different technique using the Zig Clean Color brushes, but I am enjoying something a little bit different than what I'm used to. So now I'm just filling in his little toes there, his little paws, and he is just so darn cute. Now for the cup, I want it to be a white cup, so I'm going to use some grays, and I'm hoping to blend that out enough to where it looks like there's little shadows on the cup, but ultimately it should look more white. But I do put heavy color on there, and once I blend it out, I realized that I probably put a little bit too much gray in my cup, but I still think that it turned out okay. I even added gray to that center band, and I didn't mean to, but I figured, you know what, I'm going to go in there with some brown, so it's going to cover it up. So now I'm just picking up some of the gray with the blender, and I'm adding it to the top of the cup, trying to dilute some of that color out, trying to get rid of some of that color, because I went a little darker than I would have if I was using Copics. So doing the little nose, using the dark gray, and then I got to get his little tongue colored out, and I'm going to use the same pinks that I used in the florals. And I think that he just turns out to be so stinking cute. Now for that center band in the coffee cup, I'm going to start out with that mid brown, just to kind of outline around the edges, and then I'm going to blend it out using the oatmeal, bringing a lot of that dark color towards the center and then blending it together, and then just adding a nice wash of color there with the marker itself. And I don't need to use the blender because the lighter color does a great job blending that brown out. Now it's time to do some stenciling. So I'm just prepping my little panel there, and I'm going to use this brick stencil and two Distress Oxide inks, the Tattered Rose and the Hickory Smoke. And together I think that they make a nice brick-like stone for the back panel of my card. I'm using the lighter soft brush so that I can get a really light wash of color. Going in there with the Hickory Smoke, just blending out some of that pink really makes it look like a stone. I didn't really need to use much gray because that initial wash was just enough. And that combination, I think, really looks so nice. So once I have my brick laid down, my card is really starting to come together. But while I have my Distress inks out, I'm going to go ahead and work on that second card. So this combination is the Aged Mahogany with the Victorian Velvet, which is definitely one of my favorite combinations, those two colors there. So going darkest to light, I'm starting at one end and blending over my flowers, and then blending it out with the Victorian Velvet. And then I'm going to use two other pinks. I'm going to use the Picked Raspberry and the Spun Sugar. Now, you wouldn't think that the Picked Raspberry would blend well with the Victorian Velvet, but as long as you use a light hand with that Picked Raspberry, it really does blend nicely. And then now with that Spun Sugar, going up to a really light color at the top, making a pink ombre type of effect. That first layer of color looks pretty, but it does look even better when you add that second layer on, especially when you want to add more contrast. So going back in with the darker colors, I'll go ahead and work on blending out to have a nice seamless blend, but then wanting to get more contrast, so adding a lot more ink on the bottom there of that panel. Now it does look like the ink is covering up my white embossing, but there is a resist happening, so it does come clean in the end. I'm just adding even more color and blending it out a little bit more in the center to really even out that transition. And once I have all my ink on there, I can just grab a towel and wipe that ink right off of the stamped images. And it looks just beautiful. Well, now it's time to complete my cards. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab some liquid glue and adhere this to a card base. Again, this card base is 3.5 by 7.25 inches, so it's kind of a smaller slimline card. And because the floral really just makes the card, I don't really want to cover it up other than to use a sentiment. So I chose the sentiment, "I miss you, that's all," and I popped it up on some double-sided adhesive foam. And I'm going to add a little bit of liquid glue on there, so since I am adhering it to the top of those embossed flowers, I want to make sure that they don't pop off. And then, of course, you got to have some bling, so I'm going to use these little gems from Pink Fresh Studios, and I'm just trying to decide the placement and use my art glitter glue to adhere those down. Now my little jewel picker did not want to pick up those gems today, so I'm just using my fingers to pick those up and put them on top of my little glue dots there, my little dollop of glue. And once I get those adhered, that is going to complete my card. This card was unexpected. I didn't really plan for it. I just made it on a whim, and I really think it turned out so pretty. Now to finish up my little pug in a cup with the florals, I'm going to use some of that dark gray and blend it out with the light gray to give the tabletop a little bit of shadow. And then I'm just going to blend that out with my blender pen and kind of give that little look. I had to divide it from the brick to give it, to ground the image so that it didn't look like it was floating in the air. And all you need is just a little bit of color, as I learned when I did my coffee cup. and then I can blend that out, and there is my image. So I went ahead and attached this to a craft cardstock base, and those are my 2 completed cards. I want to thank you again for stopping by the channel, and I hope you like this video featuring this bouquet of happiness and Pup in a Cup Not Too Shabby stamps. I do appreciate your comments and your thumbs up, and again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope I was able to inspire you today. So until next time, everyone, have a great day and happy crafting. Bye for now.